All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fit Vegan Podcast. I hope you're all having an amazing day. We have a special guest today, Roslyn, gut health expert, registered holistic nutritionist. So you'll be answering your questions you guys asked on Instagram and on Facebook as well. So I'm really excited to have her on. Roslyn, how are you doing today?
Good, thanks. I'm really happy to be here, Lucky. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. You have a lot. I know you're going to bring a lot of value to people listening today.
I hope so.
Yeah, so I'm excited. So one of the main things I see in like we'll just jump straight into it. Plant-based nutrition is
hmm
people are having a lot of bloating, right? And I feel like that's the most common question that I get. Like obviously there's like gut discomfort, but the big one is bloating, right? And we didn't talk about those questions before, so I want to see your answer. So what have you found that can usually cause some bloating to people?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'd say bloating is like the number one thing that people come to me. They're like, the bloating is just so bad. The distension, it just won't go away. Some people, there's different, levels of bloating. Sometimes it's just that uncomfortable feeling after you eat a meal. And sometimes it's that full on distension where people look 9 months pregnant. So, of course, there's different levels of severity there. You'd have to look at a few different things. So, of course, when we're talking about food choices, how much fiber are you eating? And so I think you've talked about this before, but if you go from a little amount of fiber to a lot of fiber too quickly, there's going to be a lot of discomfort there. So, like you say, you have to train your gut just like it's a muscle and work your way up. And I think that that's something a lot of people forget because they jump in headfirst to a plant-based or vegan lifestyle and they get so excited. And they don't realize, well, holy crap, I was eating 20 grams of protein 2 weeks ago, and now I'm eating 60 grams. And that does a lot to the body. So, of course, if you make that jump, that's one factor that could be at play. Something else to consider is, are you dealing with something like SIBO? So small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. So that's when bacteria kind of make home in the small intestine where they shouldn't be. Usually they should be in the large intestine or the colon or the gut, as we say. And so if they've traveled up into the small intestine and they shouldn't be there, that's often where they'll munch on food and then they produce a lot of gas. So a lot of people get discomfort if that's undiagnosed. So something else I would say is if they're eating a lot of dairy products. A lot of people don't realize that dairy is not really meant to be a human food that we consume, right? It's meant for baby cows. And besides like all the environmental aspects and animal welfare side of things, we just know that dairy has all of the macronutrients and the hormones and all the things that are meant to grow that cow into a really, really big cow. And so it can be really disruptive to the microbiome just because it's usually mucus forming and a lot of people just can't break it down. So that's often what we're dealing with when we're talking about a lot of dairy consumption. And usually when they cut out the dairy, it's one of the first things to go is that bloating. There could be other things at play, such as typical food sensitivities, but we know that based on gut health in general, that if you're talking about a food sensitivity, it doesn't mean you have to cut that food out if you're talking about a plant food specifically. It just means that you have to be working your way up with it, just like we're talking about the fiber. So if your body doesn't have the bacteria or the enzymes that are produced by those bacteria to break down a specific plant food, you're going to get a lot of bloating and gas when you eat that food. So say, for example, you have a lot of damage in your gut from stress, from antibiotics. So that's going to wipe out a lot of bacteria. From chlorinated water could be one of those things. Then when you eat that food, you're going to get a lot of symptoms because you don't have the diversity or you just have the damage that's going to cause you to not be able to digest it properly. And you're going to get a lot of bloating and gas. So those are the top things I see.
Okay, it was a lot. That was a lot of good information.
Yeah, no, there's so many things. There's lots of things
uh,
it could be.
I'm recognizing a lot of things because I just finished reading Fiber Fueled by
Oh,
Dr.
amazing. I love
V.
that book.
Yes, it was so good. So yeah, I connected with a lot of what you shared. So one thing that came up when you were sharing that is, like going from like 10 grams of fiber to 60, 70 grams of fiber.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have food intolerances to work your way up to it. So like
Yeah.
the bloating caused by that is almost the same as DOMS when you're training, right? The delayed onset
Yeah.
muscle soreness. So it's
Yeah. Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
like the effect of you training is making you sore, and the soreness of muscle is like the bloating, but eventually it goes away.
Yeah. I'd say most of the time it can. If you, so say for example, you're still eating a standard American diet and you are adding in a few plant foods here and there and you're getting a lot of gas and discomfort, I'd say it's not going to go away because you're still eating a standard American diet, which is probably what's contributing to the bloating and the gas and the damage in the microbiome in the first place. But yeah, for a lot of people, if you're transitioning to a whole food plant-based diet, eventually it should go away, but you need to also look at digestion because if you're not digesting your food properly, by the time it hits your gut, undigested food particles are going to be a no-go for the body in general. So I'd say there's a couple other factors at play there.
Yeah, so it's very interesting because a lot of people that are listening to the podcast are, majority of them I would like to say are vegan and looking to like thrive as a vegan, because you can be vegan and not thrive, and like a few people are looking to transition. So definitely cutting out like animal products is going to make a big difference. So if we talk about the people that are vegan, maybe a bit more junk foodish vegan than they need to, what would you say to these guys in terms of trying to reduce the bloating if they've been vegan for like I don't know, like a year already, but they still have some bloating? What are some, I know it's per
Yeah.
individual, but what are some things that they could do to help reduce the bloating?
Yes, of course. So I think you've talked about one of these things, soaking your beans and legumes from scratch and then cooking them can really help because of that phytic acid, which is just a compound that, comes along with the plant that often makes it really hard to digest the food a little bit more, but also just causes bloating and gas. I don't like to call it an anti-nutrient because it's not, it's actually cancer fighting. So that's one thing you can do, but also chewing your food. Most underrated tip ever. Gosh, most people are not chewing their food. We need to be chewing our food about 20 to 25 times per bite, enough so that it's like baby mush when we swallow. Because if it's not, again, are you surprised that your body's not actually digesting huge chunks of carrots or something like that you swallow? And like, I know people are genuinely surprised. I live when my roommate's partner, he comes over for dinner sometimes, he inhales his food and he's like, oh, I just get so bloated and gassy. I was like, Chris, are you really surprised? So I'd say chewing your food. Don't chug a lot of water around your meals. That's going to dilute the digestive juices and things that you're trying to, you need to utilize. Sorry, your body needs to break down your food properly. So I'd say those are a couple of top tips there. So also for bloating, if you're introducing a lot of new plant foods at once, I'd say start by sticking to what you know. So if you know brown rice is not a big issue for you, if you're trying to introduce something like quinoa, which you know is just a huge issue for you because you just can't break it down or digest it very well and it ends up in your stool for whatever reason, you can see it. I'd say make a small batch of quinoa and mix it in. So mix in a tiny bit with your brown rice. And this actually will just start to train your gut for that one food without giving you a huge dose of it all at once. That would be something else that could really help. And that's, again, going back to slowly training your gut. Some people like to try digestive bitters or enzymes. I'm more on the bitters side of things. It just helps to stimulate digestion by getting those digestive enzymes and juices flowing.
Yeah. So actually that brings up the question that I received a few times was, and having an underactive like stomach, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me personally, I stopped doing it. I know I should be doing it. Just like little shots of apple cider vinegar, like 15 minutes before I would have a meal, because I have an underactive stomach. So the question that came up is, how do you know if you have an underactive stomach or not? Is there
Great
science?
question. And also I stopped doing it too, because if you don't really need it, you don't really need it. Apple cider vinegar has a few benefits, but yeah. So usually you'll know based on symptoms. So again, undigested food in your stool. There's a really good chance you have low stomach acid if you're having undigested food in your stool. Low stomach acid is almost always going to go along with chronic stress, because chronic stress actually lowers stomach acid levels. So if you're someone who's like a big ball of anxiety, you have a lot of stress and overwhelm in your life, and you're getting a ton of bloating and gas, there's a really good chance you have low stomach acid. You can do a baking soda test or an HCl supplement test. That's something I would do under the care of a practitioner, but you can try that to see how your body is reacting to those things and if you're actually having adequate stomach acid levels. But most of the time we diagnose it really, really wrong. And I say we, I mean doctors, because I'm not diagnosing anything, but doctors will say, oh yeah, you have acid reflux. You must have low or high stomach acid. Sorry. So high stomach acid is actually a lot more rare than we think. So some people do have high stomach acid for sure. And you can do testing to figure that out in terms of like the baking soda thing as well. But most of the time, because everyone's so chronically stressed out, we actually have low stomach acid. And what happens is we need enough stomach acid in the stomach to trigger the sphincter which is supposed to keep the esophagus separate from the stomach. So it's supposed to close based on how much stomach acid is in there. So if there's not enough stomach acid in the stomach, that sphincter won't close properly. Or sometimes just the tone of it just loosens and then acid splashes up. So everyone goes, oh yeah, I have high stomach acid. Well, no, you probably have low stomach acid because your sphincter is not closing properly. And then it's just whatever acid is there is splashing up. So it's a little bit of an ambiguous thing, and it's never a clear-cut answer. But I would say if you're unsure, don't go on antacids or like an actual PPI or something like that right away. I would do some investigative work around stress and around undigested food in your stool and things like that first.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know about the reflux of stomach acid, even if you had low stomach acid.
Yeah, I know a lot of people don't. And that's the problem is they go to their doctor and they're like, oh, I have acid reflux. And then like, boom, right away, they're put on a PPI, which is so hard to come off, does a lot of long-term damage for the gut. And it's just a mess on so many levels.
Yeah. And yeah, sometimes we diagnose too fast. So testing is definitely like really important. Just with Jen, when she first got diagnosed, like we tried everything that sounded good, that we needed, that was like, this helps cancer, we need to do this. And then we spent like a ton of money for the first year. And then we did some testing, and it ended up that like 70% of what we were doing wasn't helping. And we could have like invested these funds into something that would be helping. So one of the big lessons I learned from all this is test. Right? You might just be wasting your money if you're just like spending on different supplements or trying different things that are not going to be serving you. So 100% test, it'll save you in the long run. Talking about chronic stress, everyone's stuck at home. COVID is crushing people. So I'm just going to assume that majority of the people have chronic stress. So in terms of like building up the stomach acid, if that is the issue that they have, like what would be a few things you said? Bitter apple cider.
Yeah, so honestly, the biggest thing is just chewing your food. Like people just underestimate that. Think about it. So go and sit down at your next meal, focus on how much you're chewing. You're probably not chewing your food enough. We need to chew in order for saliva to start and stomach acid to ramp up. So yes, what was I going to say? Digestive bitters definitely can help. Enzymes, digestive enzymes, they're kind of an ambiguous thing. We don't really know how much they actually do help. But I mean, it's trial and error. There's a lot of things that don't work for a lot of people, and there's some things that work for others. So you can try digestive enzymes as well. Cooking your foods. So start with softer foods. Don't go to the raw kale salad right away if you think you have low stomach acid, because guess what? It's going to come out exactly the way it looked when it went in. And I always love like soups and stews and things like that cook and cook your foods more, so you're not having a ton of raw foods. Or if you do want to have raw foods, go for softer veggies like romaine versus again kale, and kind of stay away from things like carrots or just grate them. But yeah, you have to go with what your body is able to process, but you have to address the stress, because 90% of the time when we're talking about low stomach acid, we're talking about stress. And then when we have low stomach acid, things like parasites and other critters can enter into our digestive tract, because they're that first line of defense. Our stomach acid is just weakened, and then that's a whole other issue.
Yeah, that's awesome that you shared that. And I realized that I had a typical human reaction of like going for bitters and apple cider when the cause was just deal with stress, right? But then people will be like, I don't want to deal with stress. I just want to grab the shot of apple cider and grab the bitters. So just going back to the foundation and addressing the root cause of what's causing that.
Yeah. Oh, so much. It's not easy to handle stress. Are you kidding me? Like this year has been probably the most stressful of them all for so many people. And I think we've both personally dealt with loss this year, and it's just been it's crazy. So that's the hard work. It's just like changing your diet, as you know, when you work with your clients. That's the hard work. Supplements are easy. Testing is, yes, definitely necessary often, but easy. It's the actual doing the work, including the stress management. That's the hard part. And I've had to do that work for myself this year, because I realized it was impacting my health at certain points. And man, oh man, does it make a difference when you start to actually put yourself first, instead of just avoiding thinking about what the other, what's going to happen from that.
Yeah, 100%. I tell that to all my members when they start. It's not what's going to make or break your transformation is what's in between your 2 years. It's not the training. It's not the nutrition. That's the easy part. is
Mhm.
how are you going to comply with it and deal with whatever's going to come up in your head, which basically is stress management. That's going to make the world a real difference. Because I've seen people eat healthy, like everything is perfect, train,
Right.
but not deal with stress and not lose weight.
Oh yeah, it's by the book, right? On the book, they're doing all the right things, but when they're not dealing with the mindset component, oh yeah, 100%. I actually have some clients working on weight loss, and it's the same thing. It's yeah, if you don't deal with the stress and you wonder why it's not happening, yeah, it's hard.
And it will never change until that is addressed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So in terms of one of the questions that came up was how much is too much fiber? So I know it's relative to where people's gut are at, right? Because we talked about like training.
Yep.
I love your point of view on that. Like what is too much fiber?
Ooh, good question. I'd say the limit does not exist. It's going to be you're going to not physically be able to eat that much food, because if you actually are eating a high fiber diet, that's what's going to increase satiety signals, and you know this because this is what you work on in weight loss, right? Like it's going to increase satiety signals and you're going to feel full. So it's really hard to overeat high fiber foods. And our ancestors used to eat around 100 grams of fiber a day. Most of us are getting maybe 50. If you're like a whole food plant-based vegan, you're probably getting around like 50, 60 grams.
Mhm.
But based on how you feel, like you'll know what your upper limit is. And you probably won't be able to get too far past like that 80, 90, 100 grams. Like that would be really hard to do depending on the volume of the food you're eating. So if I was eating, usually I think I eat around like 2,200 calories or more a day. I don't actually know, but I think I've looked in the past. And in that calorie range, if I tried to eat like 100 grams of fiber, it might be possible, but it's definitely would be like, it's hard. Like you have to work at that. So I would say there really is no limit, because fiber is only going to be doing good things in our gut, and it's only going to be helping our microbes. And if anything, the opposite question is what we need to be asking. How little how well, when we're looking at the bottom end of the spectrum, is that amount of fiber going to be causing disease for me? So is too little fiber a problem? Yes, it is. So I think the opposite end of the spectrum isn't really a concern.
Yeah. So okay. So basically, like obviously the concept of training your gut to being able to eat more, but once you're kind of at that level, then just eat, and your body will tell you like, hey, that's pretty much it, right? You would pretty much have to force yourself to get to a place where it would be uncomfortable. Because 100 grams of fiber, like I'm probably around like the 60
Yeah,
a
same
day,
here.
60 gram, but like
Yep.
100, that's a
Yeah.
lot of fiber. That's a lot of food to get to 100 grams of
I think
fiber.
that's right. That's the thing, is it's a lot of food. And maybe you might feel your gut. I mean, you probably have a really good gut health, just like I do at this point. And, 100 grams, if you were to actually eat that, for sure, the fiber might not be the issue. It'd probably just be the calories, right? So, and you could go closer to higher fiber foods, but at that point, you're probably eating a ton of grains, a ton of legumes, which is no problem, but you're going to feel full really fast. So,
Yeah. Yeah. You're going to feel heavy. So yeah, definitely like, don't be afraid of fiber, right?
yeah, please
If you
do
feel like
not be
it's too
afraid of
much,
fiber.
work your way up to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Nailed
Uh,
it.
in terms of, people always refer to like gut health. I know it's very broad, but if you could give a few pieces of advice to people, right, that they could, let's do it this way. Like, I love speed of implementation, right? So direct steps of action that you can take right away to start improving your life. So what would be like, yeah, let's go with 5 things, right? 5 things that people could do and they could implement today to start improving their gut health. So just bloating, digestion, and all of that.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, chewing would be number one. And I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but like if that's the one thing you get away from this podcast, chew your food more. Such a simple thing. Number two is increase your water intake, but also try filtered water, because a lot of people don't realize that there's a lot of chlorine in our water. And although there's no specific studies on how chlorine impacts the microbiome yet, I have a feeling if there were studies that we'd see some changes, because that's what kills the microorganisms in our water. So how do we believe that that's not going to be impacting our gut? So number two would be, yeah, increase your water. Most people should be drinking at least 2 liters of water a day. And I think that most people are not getting anywhere near there, because we need to hydrate. And as you increase your fiber intake, you're going to need more water, because oftentimes that's going to create more bulk in the stool and things like that. So if you're not hydrated, you're probably going to be chronically constipated and not even realize it. So that's number two. Number three, I would say start diversifying your diet. So every time you go to the grocery store, maybe that's once a week or once every 2 weeks, or no, I would say probably once every week for most people, a few times a week for other people. Start to add in a new plant food that you've never tried before. So pick up a new whole grain off the shelf. Try that out. Never tried farro? Yeah, give it a go. Never tried black-eyed peas? Give that a go. Never tried kohlrabi? Try it, right? And start to incorporate new plants into your diet. You're going to start to train your gut to increase the diversity of the bacteria that are there. So every type of plant food you eat feeds a unique blend of bacteria, or has a unique blend of fiber, I should say, that feeds a different kind of bacteria. The more diverse our gut is, the better health outcomes we're going to have, because a more diverse gut is really resilient. If you think about it like a team at work, you wouldn't want to go into an office where every single person at that office has the same job, right? You'd want everyone to have different specialties and functions and things that they work on. So the more diverse your bacteria are and your gut is in general, the better health outcomes you're going to have. So is that number 3, number 2, or sorry, number 4?
I think it'd be 3. But just to add to that, so
yeah,
for the people listening that haven't read Fiber Fueled, so you're saying there's not just one type of fiber?
No, there's over 10,000 different types of fiber.
Boom.
And yeah, and over 300,000 edible plants, and they exist, and those different blends of fiber are going to be present in different foods. So if you stick to the same 5, 10 foods, it's just going to be this like same old crap, different day, right? It's just your body's not going to really expand out of that in terms of health outcomes. Your body needs to have a diverse range of foods in order to have a diverse range of bacteria. And so the diversity is going to directly correlate to positive health outcomes and your ability to fight off any pathogens or things that come your way. Yeah. So diversity, I'd say, is the most important thing that you could potentially do for your gut. Sleep. Please, can you get 8 hours of sleep? Most people are getting like 5, 6 hours. And I know for some people that's okay, but if you're sensitive in your gut, most of us are going to need around 7, 8 hours in order to function. If you are stressed, I think you said this and I took this right out of your mouth, you can't digest, and you also can't form a healthy bowel movement. So if you're stressed, you're probably also not sleeping. And when we sleep, our liver detoxifies, our bowel movements are forming, all these good things are happening. So make sure you are sleeping and moving your body. Like, oh my gosh, I know this is so simple, but we're sitting down for 8 hours a day and then we're wondering why we're constipated. I had a client who invested in a standing desk and she started going for walks a few times a day. Yeah, look at that. That's great. And she's like, oh my gosh, Roz, that paired with water, paired with everything we're doing, I don't have chronic constipation anymore. And I'm like, oh, no kidding. That's amazing. So super simple things. I think the other thing that I would add would be start growing your own sprouts. I love sprouts. They're so fun. And it's such a good way to get in fiber, protein. If you're growing things like lentil sprouts, it's so easy. Just Google it, how to grow sprouts. And you can add that into your day-to-day routine. And that's a really good way to ramp up plant-based diversity, because usually you can grow things that you would never normally eat. Like, what did I grow the other? Like mustard seed sprouts and mung bean sprouts and all these amazing things. So I think that was 6 things, but they're all really good things that we talk about wanting to do. We can get really into the nitty gritty of nutrition here, but the basics, right? I have 10 foundations that I teach my clients. If you're not focusing on the foundations, it doesn't really matter what else you do. The bells and whistles don't matter.
Yeah. Well, there's so much I want to add to this because that was awesome, right? Like I tell that to my members to control the controllables, which are basically like your 10 foundations, right?
Yeah.
Control what you can control, build systems around these things to make it easier for you to sit down and chew. The water thing, I'm a water geek. Like I have a Berkey, I have a Santivia, I have a Kangen machine.
Amazing.
Don't drink water while you're eating, like you mentioned, but don't drink alkaline water around your meals, right? Because basically you need acidity and you're kind of crushing it with the alkaline water, right? If you're going to go to that extent of having like an alkaline machine.
Totally.
And for the sprouts, if you want to geek out like me, you buy an automatic sprouter, which is like
no way.
Yeah, I have an automatic.
That's a thing?
Yeah. So it's like it's like 12 inches by like diameter. And you set the base, you put your seeds, you soak them, you put the seeds, and then there's like levels to it. And then there's like a stick that rotates and the water turns on every 30 minutes. So all you have to do is like change the water every, I think 2 days. And after you just plug it, turn it on and leave it, change the water every 2 days. And then after 7 days, you have like a massive amount of sprouts. And what we did is we did broccoli sprouts because it's really high in sulforaphane for breast cancer. And we would freeze them because you like quadruple the amount of sulforaphane when you freeze the broccoli sprouts, like the amount increases. So then we would just keep like growing more and then throw those in soup, salads, smoothies, everywhere we could. But yeah,
amazing.
Sprouter is like game changer if you're like me and you don't want to like spend time rinsing. I don't even know
Gosh.
how to do it with a mason jar. Like I just use the
Oh,
machine.
you don't? That's so amazing. Yeah, that's so funny. Oh, I keep it in my drying rack in my sink, and my roommate's like, "What is this?" And I was like, "Don't worry about it." And I was like, I asked my partner, I was like, "I'm going away for 2 days, babysit the sprouts." So that would be, because he almost kills them every time. That would be great. That's funny. You can get anything in the 21st century. This is amazing.
Yeah, I have a urban cultivator, so you can grow your own microgreens inside your apartment. Yeah, just you can
Gosh,
geek
you've
out
got all
all
the
all this
toys.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. That's so funny. I love it. You're committed. It's amazing.
Yes. One of the things I wanted to do is we had a few questions from Instagram.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. So one of them was from Jeffrey, who's actually a member of the Fit Vegan Tribe. He's like, please explain the relationship between prebiotics and probiotics.
Oh gosh, I could talk for an hour about this, but I'll keep it really brief. Hi, Jeffrey. How's it going? Okay, so prebiotics are essentially any foods that feed our beneficial bacteria, aka any plant food that's high in fiber. Some do a better job than others, but what we want to aim for is soluble fiber, because soluble fiber is going to be fermentable by these bacteria. And they're going to break that down and they're going to digest it for us, because remember, fiber is indigestible by humans. And then they're going to create short chain fatty acids, which are acetate, propionate, and butyrate. And those short chain fatty acids are going to directly reduce inflammation, reverse and leaky gut and intestinal permeability, and also decrease food sensitivities. So any really fiber-rich, soluble fiber-rich food is what we want to be aiming for when we talk about prebiotics. And ironically, a lot
like
of
for soluble fibers. You have like
oh gosh. Well, the thing is, all plant foods have a mix of fiber usually. So it's not just like chia seeds have soluble fiber, although they do have a lot of soluble fiber, and flax seeds have insoluble fiber. It's not like that, right? So it's usually a combination. I would say aiming for a lot of beans and legumes and whole grains are going to be some of the best prebiotic foods, but then also some of our cruciferous vegetables like cauliflower, bok choy, broccoli, cabbage, those types of things are also really good prebiotic rich foods. It's ironic because a lot of the food elimination diets that people do cut out all prebiotic rich foods. So because they're the hardest to break down, because we rely on our bacteria to do that for us. So that's prebiotics. Please don't supplement with a prebiotic. You don't need to. I would go with a probiotic if you really need to, but just eat your soluble fiber rich foods. And oftentimes the superstars are going to be your whole grains and your legumes, and then also some of those cruciferous vegetables. But really all plant foods are going to have some level of or some mix of fiber in there that will be beneficial for your bacteria. And then probiotics. So probiotics are going to be bacteria that help strengthen the microbiome. So they help your native gut bacteria species do their best work, essentially. They're not actually going to colonize. A probiotic should just help your bacteria function and just become stronger and better. I mean, that's the best way to really describe it. I could talk about it in a more sciencey way, but a lot of people think that probiotics colonize and create imbalance in the gut, but they don't. They're actually supposed to be transient and do their work on the road. The probiotics is a huge area of like research for me. I'm a big geek when it comes to probiotics because there's a lot of crappy probiotics on the market. So yeah, I mean, I would say that that's the basis of it. And postbiotics are those short chain fatty acids. So it's funny because you think about prebiotics plus probiotics, and you could have beneficial bacteria in your gut already that are considered technically probiotics. Equals postbiotics, which are those short chain fatty acid, those compounds that are helping our gut thrive.
Awesome. I was like, I'm mind blown. I have nothing to add to that. Jeffrey, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, hopefully.
And the other question we had was bioproducts versus normal cultivation. Is there a nutritional difference?
What does this person mean by bioproducts?
I think he meant organic.
Oh, okay. I've never heard that.
That's what I got from it. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's some studies to show that organic food has around 30% more nutrients than conventionally grown food. And that's because often, and this is another area that I could geek out on, but conventionally grown produce, while yes, more accessible to the average person just for cost reasons, they tend to use the same fertilizers that enrich the soil. So they overturn the soil too quickly. There's just loss of nutrients in the soil. And there should be about 17 essential nutrients in that soil that the plant will need to absorb to have its own nutrients. So there's a really good book called The End of Food that I really recommend everyone reads because it talks about how food has changed in the last little while. So yes, organic is a better option because typically speaking, the soil quality is better. The regulations around pesticides are obviously better. But that's not to say that food in general hasn't changed over the years. Like, for example, I'm pretty sure the statistic is something like the average potato has lost over 50% of its vitamin A, and tomatoes have lost a lot of their vitamin C. It's just crazy what's happened to our food. So I'd say, yes, if you can afford at least the Dirty Dozen, which is the Environmental Working Group's list of the most pesticide laden foods, I would go with that first. I usually I'd buy like, I'd say 3/4 of my food organic. I mean, if the strawberries are organic for $8 or conventional, I'll still always buy strawberries organic because they're really sprayed. But yeah, nutrient wise, yes, there is a difference. Or a bit of a difference, and pesticides wise, of course there is a difference. So I'd say go with what you can afford, but grow your own food. That's actually the best way. Organic isn't perfect. If you can grow some of your own foods, if you have at least a little bit of land, or maybe you have a planter you can put on your deck, that's the best way to ensure nutrient density, and also just there's no pesticides, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that and answering that. Is we at our house, like we've been buying everything organic for the past few years. And
Yeah, of course.
knowing what we know now, like it's worth it because obviously there is a nutritional difference, and you're just placing a bet on your health, like in the long run, that
Yeah.
it will be better. And if
Mhm.
you stay healthy, it's dirt cheap, even if you buy everything organic. But as soon as you get sick, then it gets very expensive, way more than the difference of like buying conventional and organic, right?
Absolutely.
It's insane. Is an insane difference. So definitely, like the value of investing in yourself is
Yeah.
huge. And in terms of obviously like learning knowledge and like but in terms of food as well, it makes a big difference. So I want people to connect with that.
Yeah, it's hard because we don't see the value in it until it's too late for a lot of people. So thank you for sharing that, because I agree, you're worth it. Every penny is worth it. I mean, some people are literally on the tightest food budget, but it's like, where can you shift things so that you can afford more organic food? Because yeah, absolutely worth it. So I appreciate you sharing that as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We were spending like, I think we were. I can say it now, but we spent around 2 grand a month on food for me and Jen,
Oh, wow.
because she was in Gerson and everything was like everything was
Yeah.
like top notch. So I was a lot. I'm not saying spend 2 grand, but like if you're alone, you know, like I think $500 a month, you can get like
Yeah.
pretty much everything organic and everything healthy. But the dozen list is amazing place to start. At least get those basics
Yeah,
covered.
I agree. I agree. And it's hard because some people don't have access to a lot of organic produce. So also do what you can. Because I talk to
Mhm.
clients who are like, yeah, I don't even have like a place that I could buy much organic food. So do what you can with what you have. And yeah, it'll all fall into place, I'm sure.
Yeah, and local farmers market really help with
Yes.
that.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for summer farmers markets. That's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Awesome.
Awesome. So, well, before we wrap it up today, is there anything that you want to say to the audience, add
Yeah.
or plug,
I'll
or
just,
I know
yeah.
you're up to amazing things,
Oh, okay. Well, if I'm allowed to plug in a couple things, I have my own podcast. So if people want to check out the Plant Powered Gut Show, they can. I'm
which I've
on
been
a few
on.
different, yeah, I'm on a few different platforms. I have a free Facebook group. It's called the Plant Based Solution. You can just search that on Facebook. And on Instagram, I'm Plants First Nutrition. And the last thing I want to say is just start somewhere with adding in more plants. You don't have to go like 100% plant based overnight. For a lot of people, it's a journey. But if you're not willing to go 100% vegan, at least just start to add in more plants into your lifestyle and see what happens. And slowly but surely things will start to, the truth will start to come to the surface, because most people, when they add in plants, they start to feel better right away, and start to diversify where you can. I think that's it.
Yeah, awesome. I'll link all of those down below in the description. However it works on podcasts. I'm used to YouTube, so I'll link everything down below. Thank you very much
Yeah.
for coming on today. I really
Thanks
appreciate
for
it.
having me. Yeah.
And for everyone, if you enjoyed the podcast, be sure to share it on Instagram, Facebook, everywhere you can. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to her. Her Instagram is going to be down below, or reach out to me. And if you have any special requests for guests or topics, just message me on Instagram. I'd be happy to cover those. Thank you for listening.